Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the mind of one of history's most fascinating and honestly, most contradictory figures. We're talking about a man who helped shape an empire, lived a life of absolute extremes, yet somehow left behind the ultimate toolkit for finding inner peace. Okay, let's dive right into this and extract some incredibly practical tools from Seneca's core Stoic moral principles.
To really grasp these teachings, you have to understand the wild paradox of the teacher himself. Lucius Annius Seneca was definitely not some ascetic monk meditating on a mountaintop. Far from it. He was Rome's leading statesman. He amassed a personal fortune that would literally rival a modern-day billionaire, complete with massive estates and unbelievable wealth. And, of course, he famously served as the tutor and chief minister to the Emperor Nero. So here's the crazy part. Despite living right in the absolute epicenter of wealth, political power, and, well, terror, he remains history's greatest teacher of simplicity, endurance, and inner peace. So how exactly does a guy like that write the definitive guide on despising wealth and embracing fate? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore.
Here is our Stoic syllabus for today. We'll be covering the Humanized Stoic, wealth, poverty, and desire, fellowship and human equality, mastering the anxious mind, and finally, making words into works. Let's get to it.
Section 1. The Humanized Stoic, Philosophy for the Flawed.
What's truly brilliant about Seneca is how he took this notoriously rigid philosophy, one that often felt, frankly, totally disconnected from real life, and made it completely accessible for everyday, flawed humans like you and me. He basically humanized a system that used to seem incredibly cold. So to get our bearings, let's look at the absolute baseline of Stoic belief, the summum bonum, or supreme ideal. The Stoics believe the only true good in life is virtue, which breaks down into four main pillars: wisdom, courage, self-control, and justice. By actually achieving this, a person gains true self-sufficiency. They become totally immune to the random, chaotic blows of fortune. They realize that external things aren't inherently good or bad. It's our thinking that makes them so.
And this brilliantly illustrates the shift he made. The traditional early Stoics were, well, they were intense. They strived for apatheia, meaning total immunity to feeling. There's even this wild story of the famous Stoic Cato actually regretting kissing his wife in a moment of danger just because it showed too much emotion. No way, right? But Seneca's version is incredibly refreshing. His humanized Stoic isn't a robot. The wise man definitely still feels his troubles, but he overcomes them. He's totally capable of grief. He deeply values his friendships. Seneca recognized that we actually have to battle our own failings in a long, often painful progress toward perfection.
Moving on to Section 2, Wealth, Poverty, and Desire, the Illusion of Fortune.
So if this wise person is in control of their internal emotions, how do they handle the external world? Let's look at our relationship with physical things and those incredibly deceptive traps of materialism. Now, Seneca, again a guy accused of possessing 300 million sesterces and sprawling vineyards, writes this: "The shortest route to wealth is the contempt of wealth." What he's arguing here is that true wealth is entirely an internal attitude. Money is merely a servant to the wise man, but it's a master to the fool. Basically, if you just don't care about losing your wealth, you are truly the wealthiest person in the room.
But he didn't just speak in abstract paradoxes. He gave his friend Lucilius some incredibly practical steps. He said food should just appease hunger, and functionally, a thatched roof is just as good as a gold one. He even tells Lucilius to appoint certain days to live on next to nothing, eating basic, cheap food and wearing coarse clothes. Why do this? It's all about cultivating a relationship with poverty so that you can forestall those random blows of fortune. Think about it. If you know for sure you can survive on absolutely nothing, you completely stop fearing the loss of your wealth. Natural desires stop at a certain point, right? But false opinions, like craving a marble floor or gold decorations, literally have no end.
Section 3. Fellowship and Human Equality, Living for the Other Person.
Now, pivoting from wealth to our interactions with other people, this is where Seneca's core Stoic moral principles really shine the brightest. But think about this for a second. If the ultimate Stoic goal is to be entirely self-sufficient and completely immune to the external world, why would you ever need friends? Doesn't relying on someone else just introduce a vulnerability, like a crack in your armor?
Well, Seneca provides a genuinely beautiful answer. He says, you should live for the other person if you wish to live for yourself. So the crucial point is that friendship isn't some tool to be used for personal gain or a lifeline for when things go wrong. It's a natural human instinct. The wise person doesn't need friends to live a happy life, but they want them, because we all have this natural drive to share, to love, and to be a real part of the universal human community.
And this deep belief in human fellowship led Seneca to establish some rules for equality that were honestly just astonishingly progressive for a Roman aristocrat in the 1st century. He explicitly told people to treat their inferiors exactly as they would like to be treated by their superiors. He reminded his readers that slaves were fellow human beings, born under a common law for all mankind, which is a concept that literally planted the seeds for international human rights centuries later. He also laid out a super practical social safeguard. If you want to avoid danger from others, you have to consciously escape the cycles of hope, envy, hatred, fear, and contempt in your daily dealings.
All right, Section 4. Mastering the anxious mind, conquering fear and fate.
This brings us to the real climax of this toolkit, conquering the internal anxieties of the mind. I mean, how do we master the fear of the unknown and embrace our fate, especially in a world as chaotic as Seneca's was? He shares this incredibly striking maxim from a fellow Stoic writer named Hecato: cease to hope and you will cease to fear. Now, at first glance, telling someone to just cease to hope sounds terribly pessimistic, right? But within the Stoic framework, projecting our thoughts into the future, hoping for very specific outcomes, is exactly what creates the anxiety of fear when those outcomes get threatened.
He says, fear and hope march in unison like a prisoner and the escort he is handcuffed to. It's such a brilliant visual metaphor. Seneca points out that animals run from a danger they can actually see, and the second they escape, they relax. But humans, we are endlessly tormented by what is past and what is still to come. Our memory brings back the agony of fear, and our foresight just brings it on prematurely. We completely miss out on the peace of the present moment simply because we are handcuffed to our hopes and fears about the future. Now, what's really interesting here is how we respond to the universe's master plan. Seneca compares us to soldiers. The grumbling soldier follows the commander reluctantly. They're dragged along by fate. They complain, they resist, they resent the things they can't change, which just makes their whole journey utterly miserable. The cheerful soldier, on the other hand, receives their orders readily. They understand that whatever happens was basically bound to happen. They embrace the inevitable march of creation and they adapt to it. The universe is going to do what it does. Your only true freedom is in how you choose to react. And that leads us to Section 5, making words into works, the ultimate test. Because listen, all of this, the simplicity, the fellowship, the overcoming of fear, it is completely useless if it's just some fun intellectual debate. Philosophy has to be a practice for everyday life. Seneca absolutely detested hypocritical philosophers who merely talked a good game but didn't live it. He used this powerful imagery. What good to me is a vomiting and stupefied helmsman in a storm? When the actual storms of life hit, when things go terribly, terribly wrong, we don't need a captain who just gets seasick and lets go of the wheel. We need a steady steering hand. We need people who actually put their preaching into practice when the pressure is on.
And Seneca? Well, he faced the ultimate storm to prove his own steering hand. In AD 65, a plot against the Emperor Nero was discovered. Nero, who was deeply paranoid at this point, ordered his old tutor to commit suicide. According to the historian Tacitus, when the soldiers arrived, Seneca uncomplainingly asked for his will. When they refused him, he turned to his grieving friends and offered them his best remaining possession, the pattern of his life. He and his wife calmly severed their veins to die with equal fortitude. Because his aged body was lean from years of austere living, the blood actually released very slowly, causing immense pain. Yet he remained entirely composed. In his final, bleeding hours, he called in his secretaries and dictated one last philosophical dissertation. He truly grounded his abstract teachings in ultimate, unshakable reality when facing the capricious cruelty of Nero.
Which leaves us with this provocative final thought. Seneca proved that his philosophy wasn't just a collection of nice, flowery quotes. It was a functioning armor for the human mind. This Stoic toolkit is right here in front of us. Tools for valuing friendship, despising greed, and conquering fear. So the only question remaining is this: will you just listen to the philosophy, or will your words become works? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, stay focused and keep learning.